And Rabbi asked to share how I chose life. So I will share with you that I quite literally chose life when about 14 years ago, my heart stopped in my sleep. And I was very fortunate to have my husband with me who did CPR. Never been accused of not being able to be virtual. My husband fortunately did call 911 first and then called CPR. And however, when I was being put into the ambulance several minutes later, I still had no pulse. I woke up in the hospital a little over a day later, slurring and stuttering my speech, unable to recognize anyone, not knowing who it was or why I was where I was. To the point where people brought me pictures of my children and I said, oh, they're so cute, who are they? So the next several months were very challenging. As you can imagine, I spent almost 2 weeks in the hospital, but I made a remarkable recovery considering 90% of people who suffer what I suffered, which was a sudden cardiac arrest, died. So of the 10% that survived, they survived to differing abilities. And it was at that point that I really had to reevaluate my life, create a new normal, and in essence, choose life. And what was that going to look like for me? And I will tell you that what it looks like to me today is quite different than what it looked like 14 years ago. And I don't think those who know me back then would necessarily see that, because a lot of it is an attitude change and choices that I make. I still feel like I live a good life, I'm a good human being, I'm a caring person, a good mother, a good wife, but there are perspectives that change once someone experiences something like that. And the things that I once thought were important to accomplish in a day, returning all the phone calls, answering all the emails, getting everything done in the house that I had planned, are really so unimportant compared to what I value today. And so where I put my energy, where I give my attention, to whom I give that attention, to what I place, or on what I place value and meaning, are very different. And I would say that it was such a blessing in some ways that I experienced what I did, although I don't recommend doing it. It is because it was a very difficult time, and as you can imagine, one lives with a certain level of uncertainty after that happens. I do have a defibrillator and a pacemaker in my chest. Something like the pandemic does put a bit of fear in one when you already feel vulnerable. But I would argue that I live life much better now. It is fuller, it has more meaning, it has less stress, and all of that is such a blessing. I also focus on where I want to leave my mark, what I want this life to mean and to move, and it is truly a gift and a blessing. And I appreciate this time of year when I get to reflect on that and reevaluate how I want to move forward doing the same thing. So to all of you, I would wish you a happy new year. I hope you have the same opportunity to reflect. And if you want to hear any more about my story and also the efforts that I do to promote heart health, Dr. Kevin Volk and I will be speaking on Yom Kippur in the afternoon. We both have ridiculous near-death experience stories to share and how it has changed our lives and perspectives, arguably for the better. So I hope to see you then and there, and Lashana Tova.
The rabbi asked me to share my story and thinking about this year, but the Institute life. So this year, when I think about the Institute's life, I think about my family. On July 4th, my aunt, my uncle, my cousin, her husband, and their 2 young, precious children unknowingly stood right below a gunman who stalked the rooftops above them in Highland Park, Illinois. 4-year-old Sydney was wearing a sweet little shift dress with red and blue hearts decorating it as she was licking a red lollipop. 2-year-old Asher's lollipop was purple, and he was in his mom's arms pointing at the fire truck. Minutes before, the kids had proudly marched in the kids' parade, which ended at a plaza, which, because it was July 4th, was open and scorching in the summer heat. My aunt suggested they move down the block to a more shaded area so the kids could cool down. And the nostalgic parade in their brand new community, which they had literally moved in 2 days before, was the break they really felt they needed from all their unpacking. As my cousin Jackie described it on an Instagram post, quote, "This image will haunt me forever. 1 minute we're laughing and pointing at fire trucks and police, and the next, 30 shots were fired from the top of the building pictured here before anyone knew what was happening." They ran for safety through a shop that fortunately was open and willing to assist them. They left their daughter's scooter behind as they ran. The gunman chose to point his rifle toward the plaza, and my aunt's decision to move down the street into the shade likely saved their lives. But as I think about it, these factors assume that their survival was random. You know, that their lives were preserved by whim or sheer luck. I just say no, absolutely no. Their lives should never have been jeopardized in the first place by a disturbed 21-year-old white man with a legally obtained assault-style weapon. The message to me is not that they're lucky that they lived, but rather they never should have been traumatized in the first place. 1 week after the attack, my cousin's husband, James, asked us to, quote, "Think about the little girl who's now afraid of monsters outside, the young boy that may never enjoy the sound of fire trucks, and the parents that cannot forget the unshakable experience of running to protect them." 7 people died that day. A 2-year-old was orphaned, an 8-year-old shot in the back and paralyzed. Countless more injured and emotionally impacted for the rest of their lives. And for what? For what? I did a little research, and Highland Park was the 366 mass shooting up to that point in 2022. 365 before July 4th in our country. That's 1 for every day of the calendar year. To date, since July 4th, add another 175 mass shootings, which are defined by 3 or more people in the same place at the same time. The media couldn't possibly focus on each one of these. We're up to 541 this year. So it's impossible to understand the enormity of the atrocity until it affects you. Our family is angry, and we're trying to restore mental security. And we're frankly absolutely dumbfounded by the insanity of the mass market availability of military-grade assault weapons in this country. Please don't think this is an issue in another state, another town. It happened To my family, a member of this congregation, and it happened to yours. So taking action on gun violence is what it means to my family to choose life this year. We have to do something. She knows about it.
Choosing life have particular resonance when you almost die. It was July 2021, and I was in Cincinnati with my daughter Daphne at a sports tournament. All of a sudden, without warning, we were at dinner and I keeled over and fell to the floor. Fortunately for me, we were with John White and Gina Stoker, her two coaches. They recognized I didn't have a pulse, started CPR right away, and called 911. John asked for an AED, but the restaurant didn't have one. Fortunately, the location we were in was near an EMS center, and they got there in less than 5 minutes. They worked for 9 minutes to restore a pulse. They had to shock me several times, but fortunately that all worked. And then fortunately we were near a major medical center. They brought me to the University of Cincinnati, where they realized I had a blocked artery. That's why I had a fatal arrhythmia. And they opened that back up and put me on the path to recovery. So when something like this happens to you, you're obviously overcome with lots of emotions. Fear, gratitude, and lots of questions. Why was I among the 10% who survive? 90% of people have an out-of-hospital cardiac arrest die in the United States. How do I thank the people who saved me? How might I live my life differently going forward? After some reflection and talking to my family, I decided that one of the things I could do was working with the American Heart Association was to go public with my story. Part of the reason why survival statistics were so dismal is there's a lot of work to do. Most people don't know how to do CPR. Most locations, including most restaurants, don't have AEDs. And there's a lot of work, a lot of effort to try to change laws and try to raise money, to try to bring better awareness and try to increase survival statistics. Overcoming fear has been a long journey. We started out the first few weeks after the cardiac arrest, hunkered down in Wynwood, comforted by the fact that EMS response times in Lower Merion are very fast, and we were less than 5 minutes from the cath lab at Lankenau Hospital. Fortunately, I haven't needed to call EMS, but gradually we realized that wasn't going to be a good way to celebrate life and to live. So with trepidation, we took our first trip. We took a family trip to Cape May. I mapped out the route. I looked at where the nearest hospitals were. I knew where we'd call if something happened. Fortunately, nothing happened. I went back to work after Labor Day. Fortunately, everything was fine. I got used to driving back and forth by myself, exercising by myself, resuming all the normal routines that comprise life and the life that I now enjoyed in a way I couldn't possibly have appreciated before. We resolved to take another trip. This time we went to Sarasota, and again, I mapped out where we were relative to the nearest hospital based on where we stayed. A few more months went by. Fortunately, everything was going well. We decided to go to Arizona. This time I did not look up where the nearest hospital was. And then this summer came, and we decided it was time to fully celebrate life. Work trip to Utah, visiting friends in Montana, family reunion in California, and then finally a trip to Peru. This was the kind of adventure we had always loved to take with our family, and I must admit I had a lot of trepidation. The long flight, the medical care perhaps not being at the same level as the United States, and then we wanted to go to Machu Picchu, and there was a choice of either taking the train or doing a 4-day trek on the Inca Trail. I loved hiking. I'd always been really active. I checked with my doctors, did a stress test. Stress test was fine. They said, you can do this if you want to, but there's only about half as much oxygen at 14,000 feet as there is at sea level. We decided to do it, and I will tell you, those 4 days were among the best 4 days, the best 4 days of my life. So Stephanie Austin has a similar story that she talked about this morning. And the two of us are going to do a workshop together for anyone who's interested on Yom Kippur at 1:15. We'll talk a bit more about our stories, what we've learned in terms of our own lives, what we've learned in terms of how we allocate our time professionally and also about the important advocacy work to be done both locally and nationally. So hopefully some of you will want to join us. Thank you.
October 4th, 2021. Exactly 1 year ago today, I stood in the ICU at the Hospital of the University of Pennsylvania. Turning away, I couldn't bear to watch as my husband's eyes bulged each time he gasped for air. Instead, I fixated on the screens displaying his vitals to reassure myself his oxygen levels were good. As I watched the nurses move efficiently in and out of the room, checking tubes and vitals, measuring and calculating to ensure he was stable, all I could do was pray he would stay that way. This Erev Yom Kippur, choosing life for me means mindfully choosing my response during life's most challenging moments. This post-surgical stint in the ICU was the culmination of a physically and emotionally exhausting stay in the hospital. When Jesse arrived in the ER 10 days prior, he couldn't answer even the simplest of questions. Do you know where you are? Who's the President of the United States? What year is it? He was feverish, green with jaundice, and weak from being sick at our home for the prior 2 weeks. I mustered all of my strength to calmly answer each question the parade of specialists asked in their quest to ascertain what was going on. I sat vigil by his side, holding his hand while his fever spiked to 104. I spoke softly into his ear, and I rubbed his head through the panic attack that ensued. After a battery of tests and in consultation with a team of world-class doctors, we learned that Jesse was septic. Because the bacterial growth was on his heart valve, with each heartbeat, clumps of bacteria were flicked into his bloodstream, shooting off to all of his organs. This led to multi-organ failure and a series of mini strokes. He would need open heart surgery to remove and replace the infected valve. Just 3 weeks prior, we had been hiking to waterfalls, glaciers, and volcanoes during our trip to Iceland. And now Jesse was lying in critical condition. I asked myself, why him? Why now? Why this? But in that moment, I focused my attention on the many critical choices that lay ahead. As a professional coach specializing in stress management, I felt uniquely qualified to face this challenge given my training. I knew how to rely on people, asking for what I needed in a way that harnessed their gifts. I recruited and led what I affectionately came to refer to as Team Jesse, family and friends who stepped up to lend their unique strengths. It was only through our combined efforts that we were able to successfully support Jesse and each other. A PhD candidate in neuroscience, our daughter, Hannah, took the initiative to become Jesse's medical advocate, given her scientific background. Each time the team of doctors rounded, she joined via FaceTime. She took copious notes, asking specific probing questions, and was an integral part of the decision-making process. As a college athlete applying to graduate programs in sports psychology and performance excellence, our son Aaron naturally became the mental performance coach. We knew having a positive mental outlook would improve Jesse's chances for a better recovery. Therefore, Aaron created a mental game plan for his dad, sharing inspirational quotes, meditating with him daily, and guiding him through deep breathing exercises. This helped Jesse stay present in the here and now. My sister-in-law, Elena, volunteered to keep family and friends up to date and was a huge emotional support to me and the kids. My brother, an ordained rabbi, offered to be a spiritual advisor, leading us in prayer the night before the surgery. It was comforting to know how many of his friends and family were keeping Jesse in their hearts during their daily prayers. Blessed to be part of this sacred community, I felt very supported by calls from Rabbi and Cantor, who provided a shoulder to cry on, offered words of hope, and chanted prayers of healing with me. And when we finally returned home, we received many delicious home-cooked meals that helped Jesse to a full recovery. Each member of Team Jessie had a choice to make in the face of uncertainty. Each of us chose to lean into our unique strengths. Each choice reflected who we are at our best. And together we were confident that we could handle anything that came our way. To me, choosing life is about choosing how to respond when life throws you the inevitable, unexpected challenge. Like Rabbi Heschel said, to be or not to be is not the question. The vital question is how to be and how not to be. We chose how to be.
Natava and conjunctive. Thank you. I thank my wife for these. You're not getting them back? Okay. When I think about what it means to choose life, I'm reminded of the lessons my mother taught me in the final weeks of her life. On September 6th, the morning of her 63rd wedding anniversary, my mother, Elaine Blesnak, passed away after a courageous battle against pancreatic cancer. She had endured 7 endoscopies, fought off 6 bouts of sepsis that resulted in multiple weeks-long hospital stays, all while trying desperately to avoid contracting COVID. According to her doctors, it was a miracle that she survived any of the infections, let alone warding them off 6 times. Her 7th endoscopy revealed the cause that doctors suspected, but could not confirm she had pancreatic cancer. And so, with this information in hand, my mom chose to undergo a Whipple procedure. For any 83-year-old, it would not be unreasonable to forego such a difficult surgery. But the doctors told my mother that it was her only chance to live. And so she chose life. On March 14th, my mom underwent a successful surgery. She had to relearn how and what to eat while taking special enzymes that would perform the digestive functions that her half-removed pancreas could no longer do. But she was alive, and so she never complained about the things she had to endure. She approached every day with a can-do attitude and soon started to resume some of her normal routines, like visiting her kids, dinners out, and even movie club. I will never forget our last dinner out at Belrose in July, her favorite place. It was half-price wine night. She ate, drank, and looked amazing. Then, in late July, she mentioned to me that she had some pain in her side. Her doctors ordered a scan. Not 4 months from surgery, her cancer had spread to her abdomen and lungs. I was told she had 3 months to live, give or take. My mom, who literally chose life every step of the way in her battle against pancreatic cancer, had run out of options. She no longer had the choice to choose life. This was a concept that I simply could not get my brain around. And so, like so many others, with a loved one confronted with a terminal disease and no standard of care treatments available, I explored alternatives. I learned about cocktails of medications combined with restrictive sugar-free diets that could starve cancer cells. We had a virtual consultation where the doctor explained to my mom that she would need to cut out sugars, eat lots of vegetables, and exercise. She gave it the fighter's fist pump and a thumbs up and said, "Let's do it." I was pumped. I ordered the supplies. My mom was choosing life. The next day, I went to see her, buoyed by the hope of starting a new treatment. And I asked her, "Mom, is there anything that you want that I can get for you?" And she replied, "Can you get me a vanilla cream donut from Yum Yum Donuts?" I couldn't believe it. Did she not know that donuts have sugar? She was completely ignoring the doctor's advice. I said to her, "But what about what the doctor said? You're supposed to cut out sugar." She smiled at me and said, "Let's start that tomorrow." "Let's start that tomorrow" became a daily refrain until I stopped asking. Despite having received all of the supplies, she never started the treatment. I thought about this a lot. Why was my mom not choosing to live? It begs the question, can you choose life while accepting inevitable death? Upon reflection, I believe the answer is a resounding yes. You see, I realized that my mother was teaching me a lesson, the difference between minutes and moments. While I was so focused on extending the minutes of her life, she was focused on the moments. Think about it. We never say live in the minute. We say live in the moment. We never say seize the minute. We say seize the moment. She was choosing to live in the moment, and that's what she did during the final weeks of her life. Walking in the pool with my daughters, holding on while they were holding on to her tightly on a perfect summer day, holding hands with my dad on the couch, a dinner surrounded by family, a walk on my sister's farm to pet a horse that my niece turned into a unicorn because she always wanted to see a unicorn, and yes, a vanilla cream donut, which she absolutely loved. She understood that it's moments that count and that minutes without moments are just a hollow measure of time. By sheer coincidence, this wisdom was echoed in a delightful rom-com I found myself watching this weekend called Marry Me, starring J.Lo and Owen Wilson. And everybody here can judge me, but I love a good rom-com. In a quiet moment alone, discussing the plausibility of their relationship, Owen Wilson says to J.Lo, "You are banking a whole lifetime on a moment." To which she replies, "I am banking a moment on a moment. Get enough of those, and that's a lifetime." My mom lived a lifetime of moments. This year, when I choose life, I am choosing to live in the moment.
Hi. When I think about what it means to choose life, I think of my community at Camp Galil, the Jewish summer camp I grew up at and now work at, and all of the love and energy that embodies the Jewish summer camp experience. In spring of 2020, I had to watch as the head of camp gave a heartbreaking speech to the community that our doors were officially shut for the summer. As she held back tears, she spoke about the connection between community and resilience in times of crisis. She also took that opportunity to not give up. And instead of walking away for the summer, she launched our online Galil at Home program. That summer, I was invited to lead this online program while actually living at Camp Galil. My favorite activity was making breakfast together every morning online. We made the most of what we had and still provided for our community in all the ways we could. Even though the program was successful, it was heartbreaking to live at an empty summer camp. No singing on the benches after meals, no running around playing ultimate frisbee, no cannonballing into the pool, no Kabbalat Shabbat. The laughter and life that is summer camp was gone. That summer was the start of my journey leading my beloved Jewish summer camp through this multi-year crisis. Back in person in 2021, I decided to be a staff supervisor and the operations director, and no longer an age group counselor. Part of my job was rethinking Jewish summer camp to fit our new reality. How to follow the CDC's guidelines to ensure safety while not compromising our sense of community. Our campers were put into pods by age group, which meant that we needed to figure out new procedures for how campers could eat in our Chadar Rochel, Hebrew for dining room, gather all together for Havdalah, and even brush their teeth in our communal bathrooms when masks were required. But despite all this, summer 2021 was full of magic. The ruach, or energy, that is Jewish summer camp was alive once more. Smiles, hugs, and laughter filled the air as soon as the campers arrived and carried on throughout the summer. It seemed as if we couldn't get enough of that spirit that is Galil. Campers were back on the benches, singing and shouting after meals. The sounds of dribbling basketballs filled the air every afternoon. Our staff was fresh and creative, bringing new traditions and programs. We couldn't do day trips out of camp, so instead we brought in moon bounces, water slides, and foam parties. We embraced all that we had and re-envisioned what it meant to be a community. In 2022, I decided to further my journey on leadership and become the head of camp. Thankfully, camp was a bit more normal this summer, which meant that we could focus on choosing life in all the ways that we always do at camp. At Camp Galil, we teach our campers that they are capable of anything, whether in the talent show or on the ropes course. We empower them to become activists, use their voices and fight for change. We encourage them to be their best, and we believe in all that we know they are capable of. The ways in which we let kids find joy and confidence and stand up for what they believe in, all of that is what it means to choose life, and all of that is sacred. At Camp Galil, we live life to the fullest, and that is what choosing life means to me. Thank you.
When I think about choosing life, I think back to January 15th of this year. One of my family members called and asked if I was listening to the news. I was not. She told me to sit down. She then told me my nephew, Charlie Citron Walker, a rabbi in a small congregation in Colleyville, Texas, was being held hostage in his synagogue with 3 members of his congregation. Rabbi Charlie, as he is called, had earlier invited into the synagogue a stranger who came to the door and appeared to need shelter. Rabbi Charlie welcomed the man and made tea for him. A short time later, Charlie heard a click of a gun. The man next pointed a gun at Charlie and his 3 congregants, spouted anti-Semitic tropes about Jews controlling the world and the government, and demanded the release from a Texas prison of a convicted terrorist. For close to 11 hours, and while a gun was pointed at him, Rabbi Charlie talked to the gunman in an attempt to develop a relationship with him to try to defuse the situation and stay alive. Among his rants, the gunman said, "I love death more than you Jews love life." My family waited and prayed. My niece Adina, who is Rabbi Charlie's wife, his daughter, and my sister, who coincidentally was visiting them, waited in a church across from the synagogue with members of the local Jewish, Christian, and Muslim community who all offered their support and prayer. As I spoke to my niece and sister throughout the day, they feared that Rabbi Charlie and the other hostages would be killed. In the face of terror, Rabbi Charlie chose life and took control of his fate. Seeing that the gunman was becoming increasingly agitated and belligerent, Charlie looked for an opportunity to flee. Relying on his previous security training and with remarkable presence of mind, he took advantage of a moment when the gunman appeared distracted. Charlie hurled a chair at the gunman, which allowed Charlie and his fellow hostages to run for the door and escape. After his trauma was over, Rabbi Charlie again chose life. He could have withdrawn into a shell, but instead he chose to use his experience and newly gotten platform for a larger purpose. He now speaks nationally about anti-Semitism. He has testified before Congress about the urgent need to expand federal funding to protect Jewish and other religious institutions. And he has become a special advisor on security to the Anti-Defamation League. While engaged in all these activities and still to this day processing his trauma, he has moved with his family to start a new journey as a rabbi at a synagogue in Winston-Salem. In February, the New York Times published a guest essay written by Rabbi Charlie. He wrote and continues to say that it always will weigh heavily on him that he unknowingly welcomed into his synagogue the person who would later attack him and his congregants. Nonetheless, Rabbi Charlie remains totally committed to the idea of welcoming and caring for the stranger. As he noted in his New York Times essay, the command to care for the stranger is mentioned at least 36 times in the Torah, more than any other mitzvah. After Rabbi Kalish asked me to speak, I asked Rabbi Charlie about the overriding continuing themes for him arising from his ordeal. He talked about the importance of living values of hospitality, particularly in places of worship. He talked about the challenges of balancing hospitality and security, and about the imperative of being prepared for emergencies. Most significantly, he talked about gratitude, his gratitude for being alive. For the rest of our family, when we recovered from thinking about what could have been, who else might have been in the synagogue that day, we affirmed our commitment to not being passive, never taking life for granted, and to living our lives fully with gratitude and with a purpose. In closing, I want to thank Rabbi Kalish for reaching out to me after this ordeal, for her compassion, for her numerous phone calls, and for the chicken soup she sent us to help us heal and move on with life. L'chaim.